welcome back to my series. There was a little bit of a hiatus, but let's get back into things, shall we? If you've forgotten, this series has been me watching every Best Picture from the Oscars since the beginning. If you haven't, check out the other videos before this one to visit the earliest winners. If you have any worries about being able to watch early films, it's okay. I had the same reservation, but I found myself really impressed with the film so far. Well, at least 2 of them. So go back and watch the old videos and join us here at the 4th Oscars, where the 1931 film Cimarron won Best Picture. This was another case of the classic press clay, never heard of this film before. It felt refreshing to see a movie I did know, last video, All Quiet on the Western Front, but that feeling was completely squashed with this film. I will say the movie poster grabbed me. There's something about the warm coloring of the poster that drew me in. It's quite different from the past Best Picture winners, so I think seeing this dramatic man, pretty much shirtless on the cover with a gun in his hand gave me reason to look forward to this movie. Another reason I was looking forward to this movie because it was a Western. I love Westerns. One of my all-time favorites is Tombstone with Kurt Russell. Tombstone came out in 1993, so I wanted to see how a 1931 film tackled the genre, being so much closer in time than the modern Westerns. This movie was based on a novel of the same name written by Edna Ferber. I had not heard of this author before, but after only doing a little reading on her, I feel like I should know more. A Pulitzer Prize winner in fiction, she wrote short stories, novels, plays. Some of the characteristics of her works include a diverse group of supporting cast and strong female protagonists. These hallmarks make their way into this film, but let's not get too far into that just yet. This film was directed by Wesley Ruggles, A+ name. Ruggles started out as an actor, but transitioned to directing. He ended up directing over 50 films, a common trend with these early directors. He directed and produced London Town, which was British cinema's biggest commercial and critical failure in its history. It was also the last film he directed. That blemish is not to say anything about the quality of this Best Picture. It was just interesting that he was hired to direct this musical because he was an American, and the British company financing the movie thought that an American would have a better grasp on musicals, despite him not directing anything like it. Thankfully, this movie was not a musical. The man who played Yancey was Richard Dix. He's appeared in 101 films, both silent and sound. Sadly, he battled alcoholism throughout his career, which caused him to slowly lose stardom. Though the tragic end towards the tail end of his career, he had some notable roles, including Wyatt Earp in the 1942 film Tombstone, The Town Too Tough to Die. Remember how I said I loved Tombstone, the 1993 film? Well, Richard Dix was in an early adaptation. I actually put the 1942 film on my watch list because I'm curious to see how a 1942 film tackles those events. Sabra was played by Irene Dunne, an actress who was most known for her comedic roles. She, like Richard Dix, had many roles. She stayed relevant for a long time, and after retiring, set her sights on humanitarian efforts. She worked for so many charities and ended up the American delegate to the United Nations. She took special interest in helping children around the world. So let's get into the movie. I thought it was good. What really captured me and kept me present in this film was the passage of time. I thought this movie dealt with Osage and its growth from 1889 to 1929 in a fascinating way. Though 4 movies into this series, I still have my bias against old movies. I have vague memories of my family having old westerns on and thinking they were cheesy. I'm thinking of, bullets ricocheting off rocks, making noises, and guys grabbing their chest and falling off cliffs. I half expected this to be the same, but was pleasantly surprised by the depth of character. Take, for example, the character of Dixie Lee. My assumption of the character and how she would be portrayed was a kind of temptress, an embodiment of the wilderness of the West, and Yancey would be tempted by her. But I was wrong. Her story, much like the story of Yancey, was a lot more complex and personable. And I think we owe that to Edna Ferber, the author of the book, for that. Her white characters breathed a kind of relatability, a kind of humanness that I didn't expect. How easy would it have been for Dixie's character to be a surface-level temptress, but her trial scene was very humanizing and pushed forward the idea of the West and the supposed new beginning it could bring. Now, I said white characters because, while present, I felt the minority characters were not fleshed out as much as I wanted. They seemed surface level, and the death of Isaiah was okay, but the movie kind of just moved on. On top of that, the plight of the Native Americans was brought up and talked about. And I'm thinking about the scene in the church tent when someone accuses the Native Americans for cheapening out on a donation, and Yancey's like, why would they donate when all of their land has been stolen from them? And there seemed to be some recognition there, but the characters themselves didn't have a lot of screen time or change or character. With that said, it was the original novel that was the inspiration for these inclusions and made the West feel more lively. Take Tombstone, for example, a movie that I love, and I can't keep mentioning, but it doesn't feel the same way as this movie. It doesn't have the same feeling of a diverse world. That is something that this movie did really well. And by focusing on one location, the movement and the growth of the town gave it a breath of life. I thought the main actors, Irene Dunne and Richard Dix, did a great job. I thought they played their role really well, and their interactions and dialogue had me captivated. A view that I had before this series was something that I'm slowly shedding, is the idea that acting back in the day was bad or kind of had an air of over-the-topness. But that wall is coming down. This movie had great performances. I think the male and female lead and Estelle Taylor, who played Dixie Lee, gave a motivated performance. On the stand, Estelle Taylor moved me with her story. Now, shooting scenes were a little cheesy. Those men getting shot is what I remember from my mom's old westerns, but that didn't take me out of the movie. Just over 2 hours, I didn't think this movie overstayed its welcome. Each chapter of the town was shorter and shorter as time went on, and I think that helped with the movie's pace. By picking up steam and making each section shorter, the film felt faster. Now, is this my favorite Western? No. Is this the worst Western? Oh no, not even close. This was a good movie and a good trend for Oscars. I'm not meaning to take shots at the Broadway Melody, check that video out, but I wondered the path the Oscars would take after that movie. What is the trend of the Oscars? This year they picked a Western, which to my knowledge doesn't have a lot of winners. I can't think of any on the top of my head, but and I say this all the time, my Oscar knowledge is close to zero. But back to the movie. The scope of this movie was impressive. The initial scene was huge and had a lot of coordination. Now, if you watch closely, some of it was kind of comical. Like the final people in the giant wave are just people that walk. Good luck getting land in that way. In a not so comical way, I was scared for the people and the animals. I mean, the chase was chaotic and felt like a real mad race. More than 5,000 extras were used for that shot. People and horses were bumping into each other, and I don't think that would be allowed nowadays. And probably for good reason. Now, despite being in the midst of the Great Depression, the budget of this film was more than $1.5 million, which is about $30 million in today's dollars. So this movie had some big bucks behind it, and you could see it in the big sets and the big shots. All that to say, I liked this movie. I enjoyed it, and I appreciated the scope and the acting. I have found so far I'm eating up these early Best Pictures, which, to be honest, surprises me. But it is enjoying the journey that will get me the motivation to move on and keep watching some of film history. So let's move on. The 5th Oscars is next, and the movie we will be watching is the 1932 film Grand Hotel. Another film I know nothing about. Surprise, surprise. Have a great day, and I hope you see a good movie this week.